Your Life Unfiltered podcast with your hosts, Ketu Sasari and Deepam Jain. In this podcast, we dig deep into the life experiences of our guests, the connected dots between their early experiences and what they're doing today. Today, we have a very special guest, Monica Shah. Monica, do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey guys, I am Monica Shah. My name is Monica Shah. I'm a board certified rheumatologist and fashion model. I'm here to kind of talk about my journey with you guys. I'm so excited.
Excellent.
Fantastic.
Thanks for joining, Monica. And before we talk about what you're doing today, we'd love to hear about your early experiences, early childhood. Just talk to us about your, where you grew up, what kind of environment you grew up in, any
Yeah,
early motivations, inspirations that basically led you to do what you're doing today.
yeah, absolutely. So I was born and raised in Tampa, Florida, which I still currently reside in. So this is home for me. And I grew up in a family of doctors, which is not very, not the not what most people will say, that they're like, oh, my whole family are all doctors. But I grew up in a family of all doctors, and you would think that that's really what shaped me into going into medicine, but it was quite the latter. It was usually all the dinner conversations we had was what my dad saw in the office and what my family cousins saw in the office and the patients they treated. So it was definitely something that was very normal in terms of conversation for me. But they really didn't push me to do that. They really allowed me to kind of explore my passions and journeys. And I really had a passion for English. And I really was going to major in mass communications when I started college. I did a lot of journalism growing up, broadcast journalism. I did news for, elementary school, middle school, and high school, and then even in college. So I went in with the intentions of majoring in broadcast communications. And it really wasn't until my first year of college, my freshman year of college, I went on a mission trip with my dad that he organized in Honduras. And he was like, it'll be a great trip for you to get some exposure, get community service hours, and kind of get a firsthand experience of what we get to do as physicians. So I went with a bunch of my friends, and that was probably the most life-changing experience, an eye-opening experience, which shifted my path a little bit. So I really gravitated towards the sciences. I gravitated towards the impact that one person could make, particularly physicians, and that's who we traveled with. But we went to this remote village in Honduras, and I remember like lines of people. There was a remote village. The doctors and the hospitals were hours away. These people had no access to healthcare, and so we set up in this remote village. We brought all the supplies. We had one of every kind of doctor. We had a dermatologist, a GI, a cardiologist, and so it was really eye-opening because we worked with these doctors. I mean, we were all in college and high school. We worked with these doctors firsthand, and they showed us what they were doing, taught us what they were, doing, what these conditions they were treating, and to see the impact they made just from giving patients supplies, giving patients access to medication, seeing that glimmer of hope that they had for themselves and for their own health was truly like an eye-opening experience for me. So I went back and I actually decided to change my major at that point. So I majored in biomedical sciences, and then I minored in broadcast communications at that point. So that was really that turning point for me, where I still had a passion for both, but I felt like the trajectory for my my purpose in life changed. And so that's really what started my path to medicine and got me to where I am today.
Yeah, that's really inspiring because it sounds like you pivoted multiple times throughout your career path. So you thought about it, and then something really reignited that passion for you to want to pursue it. So that's really
Yeah.
fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
I guess building off of that, do you have any advice for people that are looking into finding their passion?
Yeah, for me, it was all about keeping my mind open, keeping my options open. I feel like we're very limited, and maybe society's standards of what we should be doing, especially in the South Asian community. It's like you should be a doctor, you should be a lawyer, you should, work in finance or IT. We have this stigma around our society and the way we were raised as to what our appropriate, jobs are, careers are. Especially as a woman too, I think there's another stigma of how you should be and the things you should be doing, careers you should be pursuing. Um, but for someone that's kind of struggling, it's like keep your options open and your mind open, because the things that you'll find a passion for will gravitate toward you. Your mind will constantly wander in that direction. You'll want to find opportunities to be trying different ways to pursue that career, to work with people that specialize in that career, to have access to that career, to immerse yourself in that type of job environment. And I believe that for me, especially personally speaking, I think it's firsthand experience. You won't really know until you're doing the work, until you're immersed in that environment. That will you really know if it's for you or not. So I don't, I really like try to preach that it's not really about society. It's about you and your wants and needs and what will ultimately make you happy and what brings you purpose. And I think ultimately what will bring you purpose is what will make you happy. And that'll be the driving force and the catalyst to succeed, to success, long-term success, and going through those hardships in whatever career path you choose.
Well said, Monica. Thanks for sharing that. And what an inspiring journey from majoring in broadcasting to kind of pivoting midway. Just before we start this conversation, you and I were talking about how you've also got involved in fashion and modeling, and you actually participated in a competition back in college. And I guess you won Miss India Florida, if I'm not wrong. So can you talk us a little bit more about that? Give us the setup. How did you get into it? What is your experience? And
Yeah.
what did you learn from it?
So I ultimately, and I truly say this like completely transparent, I did this to break out of my comfort zone. Their end goal was for me like to just enjoy the time, say I did something different and I stepped out of my comfort zone. And I was at a position in school where I could take the time to try something new, which I was really grateful for. And I had friends that were also doing the pageant with me, which I think ultimately nudges you more to want to do it because you're like, oh, I have friends that are also going to experience it with you. And for me, truly, my mindset was you're trying something new. You can say, you stepped out of your comfort zone and you did it with your friends. Worst case scenario, you said you had an experience and you had a great time and you made great memories. So for me, that was truly the ultimate goal. I wanted to just check that off my list. It was not even a bucket list item, but I thought it was intriguing enough that it would be a cool story to share, down the line with my family. So I went in, but I also, to be honest, I have the mindset of I'm also if I'm going to do it, I'm going to go 100%. And so I committed to it. I committed to, perfecting the talent, which I did a dance and I, pitched interviews and I worked. My mom became my pageant mom, and we would practice together and do all these things. And so I really was committed to making the most of the opportunity as well. And along the way, it just happened that I won, and it was a life changing moment for me, truly, because I think it allowed me at that moment to realize that I shouldn't be limiting my potential. And I think I psych myself out, much like I think a lot of people do when they're trying something new. It's something that's nerve wracking. You've never done it. It's constantly like, what are people going to think of me? Am I going to fit in? So I battled all of those emotions and everything that it was, my brain was telling me to psych myself out. But I had a good support system. I had friends that were doing it with me. And so I was like, worst case scenario is it's an experience. But I wanted to go in all the way and do it all the way. So I did, and I won. And that really, like I said, opened the doors for me and allowed me to even realize that I was capable of doing something else. And that, I think that was the coolest part for me.
Would you say that winning actually really boosted up your confidence in the idea that you can do something you've never done before and really succeed at it? So do you think like it was a really confidence boosting type of moment?
Absolutely. And it's not so much like the flattery that, oh, you want a beauty pageant, like you're pretty. It wasn't that. It was, like you said, it was my mindset now shifting. Like, wow, you were psyching yourself out this whole time, but you're actually really capable. And I think that was like the take home message for me was there are so many things that we all are capable of doing that we probably psych ourselves out half the time, but we truly are capable. And I think it's if you set your mind to wanting to do it, wanting to try it, it's not really going to be a failure. It's just going to be a lesson. And you can say, all right, now I have the confidence to try again. And that really was the eye opening for me, where I was like, okay, I just gained a little bit more confidence than I had going in. And I can carry that confidence to doing and trying something else that's challenging or mentally daunting for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
That makes
amazing.
sense.
So I guess follow-up question to that is, what's next for you then, right? You already dominated two things, with winning one and becoming a doctor, right? So what's next for you now?
Yeah, so now I'm really trying to hybrid both of my worlds in a way. So, like I said, I also minored in broadcast communications and mass communications. So I'm really trying to hybrid my worlds in in kind of breaking that box of like, oh, you're just a doctor or just this, and I want to hybrid those worlds in a way that I can talk and educate about medicine, on a bigger platform. So I've taken to my social media to do that. I've worked with different um, news companies locally, magazines, and then I also am working with designers in different local boutiques to kind of bring fashion into medicine and make medicine more less stiff and less what we grew up seeing our parents do. And making it more of where it is about personality and you can be a doctor and have other passions and interests. And I'm hoping to take that to a bigger scale.
Okay, amazing. Do you want to share a little bit about the different media outlets you've been pursuing to achieve that? Because it sounds like it's quite a few, right?
Yeah, so I've worked with a lot of online magazines that deal with education and rheumatology. I've dealt with a lot of local magazines in Tampa, and I just got nominated for Women to Watch in Tampa Bay. So I'm doing yeah,
Congratulations. It's huge.
I'm working locally, but I think that's like a step for me, right? Like taking any step to get to that next step. And so for me, it's starting locally. I've worked with a lot of online outlets, and then I'm working now to work with more news and media outlets to bring kind of that like full spectrum, full circle education, mass communication, whole world together.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I actually want to go back to something you said before when you were talking about the pageant. It sounds like we can observe a theme here. As we kind of reflect on your journey, which is basically having an open mind when you're inclined towards something, right? Which is what you did when you're pursuing your undergrad, and you try to pivot away, decided to pivot away from broadcast to medicine, and similarly here as well. I guess a question I have is, in hindsight, did you have an inclination towards modeling while growing up or while having some of these earlier experiences? I know you had the similar inclination towards medicine from an early childhood too.
Honestly, no. And that stemmed a lot with where my self confidence was growing up. And I didn't have
Got it.
a lot. And so I think that was that moment that came like cultivated what I probably lacked growing up all these years. And so
Mhm.
a lot of it, I didn't even think twice about it. You looked in the mirror and you didn't have that self confidence growing up as a kid in elementary school and middle school. I know a lot of my friends talk about like being one of the few Indian kids in their school and you not looking like the rest of the kids and fitting in
Hmm.
like the rest of the kids. So I firsthand did experience that. And so a lot of my self confidence lacked growing up. And that's full transparency. So getting to this moment and being able to talk about that and all the things, all the steps that it took, all the years that it took, it wasn't
Right.
overnight. It absolutely was not overnight. And that's something that was a challenging journey for me. And another
Hmm.
reason why doing that pageant and doing that was important to me in sense of like challenging myself to believe that I am, enough and that I am capable. But also kind of fighting all the fears that I grew up with as well.
Right. Of course.
Okay. So what I wanted to dig a little bit more into was now the medicine side, right? So I know you're now a doctor of rheumatology, right? So why rheumatology? What attracted you specifically to rheumatology, or did you just kind of fall into it, or did you know from the get go that you really wanted to go into rheumatology?
So I didn't know really until I became an actual doctor, until I started my residency. I graduated medical school. I did all the training and taking all the tests and all that stuff. And then you start actually practicing medicine for real and treating patients for real. And so, residency, a lot of it took place inside the hospital. So I didn't get that taste of rheumatology. But we do electives in internal medicine. You're trained in all facets of medicine. So you work in cardiology, you work in gastroenterology, and you get exposure to rheumatology. And fortunately, I had that early enough in my career where I had really wonderful mentors. And I got to firsthand treat those patients and see the impact a rheumatologist could make on those patients. And for me, I gravitated towards rheumatology because it fit a lot of my personality. So I'm very much a people person. I want to develop those interpersonal relationships, that doctor patient relationship. I want to build that. And I really, when I struggled with that in the hospital because patients come in, for a short period of time, they come in for their acute problem. We get them all fixed up. They leave. And I was the one questioning, like, how are they doing? What's going on? Are they still taking their medications? I wonder if everything worked out okay. So I constantly found myself wondering what was going on after the fact. And that's when I knew I needed to be in a field where I was going to be in my patients' lives long term. And so I think rheumatology speaks to a lot of that. You're not only treating very complex medical illnesses, but you're also going to be an advocate for your patient the entire way through. So I saw that growing up with my dad and his own patients, how they knew a lot about his life and they talked about, how was your vacation and how was your trip? So it was more than just, hey, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Okay, these are your meds. Okay, next. It was less robotic and more just organic in terms of having these
Got it.
conversations beyond the health of the patient, but getting to know the patient. And I think
Okay.
that's what I really, really love about my job.
Yeah, I totally get that. It's for certain fields of medicine, you have very short-term patients. I get it. With rheumatology, you have a much more longer-term patients.
Yeah,
But let's take a step back. There may be people out there that don't know what rheumatology is. Do you want
yeah.
to explain that to them in very simple terms?
Yeah, so basically, I'm a physician that received further training in treating systemic, so body wide inflammatory conditions. So I deal with autoimmune conditions. And autoimmune basically just means that the body is attacking parts of your body that it shouldn't. So the immune system is ramped up and it's affected your joints, it's affected other organs, and that can lead to a host of symptoms, including joint pain, joint swelling, joint stiffness, rashes. And so it really, these autoimmune conditions, not only they go beyond the joints, they affect other organs, they affect your eyes, your liver, your heart, your kidneys. So we're dealing with a lot more in-depth things than just the joints, but um, it's really the body just going rampant on on itself.
Got it. Got it. I guess a question I have kind of to build off of that is that you've obviously spoken a lot about your experience with autoimmune disease, and they have obviously influenced your work as a rheumatologist as well. And as a patient advocate as well, can you talk more about this journey and how you've been able to use your experience to better understand and care for your patients, essentially?
Yeah, so a lot of our patients come in, they're as young as 12, 10, 12, they're early teens, all the way up to patients that are 100. So I deal with a spectrum of different patients. And a lot of what I pride myself in is building that trust. We all go in, we go see a new doctor, we don't know what's going on with our body, we don't know what's happening. We're searching for clarity, for answers,
Hmm.
for hope, for help. And I treat every patient encounter as if, I was treating my own family. And we leave the emotions out of it. I know we, as doctors, say we have to, limit our emotions and the patient interaction. So I strive myself in educating the patient and building that trust with them. And that takes time. So, a lot of our rheumatology visits take upwards to an hour as a new patient. And we're going over everything. We're doing a full physical exam. We're communicating about goals of treatment, expectations of treatment. And every encounter is that. Every encounter is different. Every encounter takes its own educating. And that's something that as a doctor, I do my due diligence in because for you, it's really important to understand the expectations of why we're going to be working together and how we're going to be working together. And so that
Hmm.
all of that happens every single day in a different conversation for every patient. So there's no shortage of education for me. And that's really the best part of this is building that trust and building that relationship with the patient so that moving forward, we can work better together to obtain their goals, to get them to back to achieving their fullest life and living their best life. Because a lot of rheumatology, most all of our autoimmune conditions have no cure. And I don't think people realize that.
Right.
I don't have a cure for the illness that we're treating, but I can get you to a point where you don't know that you are dealing with an autoimmune disease. And that's my goal every single day.
Got it. Wow.
Do you have
Wow.
any advice for people that have not anti-inflammatory, inflammatory conditions like that in terms of like lifestyle changes, diet changes, things like that that would really help people in that population?
Yeah, so what we do know about a lot of autoimmune conditions is some part of it is genetic. So if you have first degree relatives like mom, sister, siblings with autoimmune disease, you're 2 times more likely in certain autoimmune conditions to also develop that. So it doesn't mean that you absolutely will, but you are at higher risk than the next person. And then we know about certain environmental triggers, two that are what we call modifiable, so things that you can change. Number one is smoking. So we know smoking is associated with a lot of autoimmune conditions. So making sure that you live a healthy lifestyle in terms of smoking or not smoking, I should say. Um, and the second thing is actually, and particularly with something called rheumatoid arthritis, um, they talk about oral health, and there's certain bacteria in the oral cavity that is actually predisposing to certain autoimmune conditions, especially rheumatoid arthritis. So making sure that those things that are in your control. Other things are obviously making sure you live a healthy lifestyle in terms of staying active. And I think people always think, oh, I have arthritis, I shouldn't be exercising or I shouldn't be doing X, Y, and Z. But in fact, they recommend exercising at least 5 days a week for 30 minutes to keep your joints lubricated, if we will say, to keep them moving. And then also, dietary, certain things that we know, especially in the Western diet now, when you think it back to like cavemen and all, they were almost living a diet in the paleo diet, if you will. Everything was raw from the ground. And as we've transitioned into this Western diet, we're really heavy in fats and really fat predominant. So we know that high fat diets can induce certain enzymes that are pro inflammatory. So almost living a Mediterranean lifestyle for simple purposes, but there isn't one diet, I should say, because people always ask me what diet. There isn't one diet that's been proven to be better than the other, but you want to center around whole grains, whole foods, as clean as less processed as possible. So things that are pro-inflammatory, red meats, and alcohol, sugars, all of that, high fats, omega 6 fatty acids, things like that are very pro-inflammatory. So leaning towards those nuts, seeds, lean meats, things like that will really help in the long term.
Okay, what about like from a supplement perspective? Because I've heard, believe it or not, from TikTok, we call it edgy
Yeah.
talk, with a lot of stuff that's been posted out there. But like from what I understand, there's a lot of now we'll call them, I guess, chemical compounds that are like plant based that are really helpful from an inflammation perspective. So, are you familiar with like resveratrol or CoQ10 or um, lutein? Or I mean, there's a bunch of them. Like, do you think that's really helpful for people that are facing rheumatology types of conditions?
So there's actually one study, it's called a vital study, and they just published it in the British Medical Journal. And they did this study first to look at the effects of vitamin D, so 2,000 international units of vitamin D3 and 1 gram of omega 3 fatty acids. And they looked to see, initially, the purpose of the study was to see if they could reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease and cancer. But what we found from an autoimmune perspective, and granted, this study was done in patients over the age of 50, but it's food for thought because it's the first time we actually have direct evidence. But they found that 2,000 international units of vitamin D3 actually reduced the incidence of autoimmune disease by 22% in 2 years. And then that increased to 40% by year 4. So we do know that vitamin D actually has a role. Omega 3s didn't have as much of a significant impact, but that's also saying that we do know that omega 3 fatty acids are anti inflammatory. So they can help in terms of reducing inflammation, maybe not preventing autoimmune disease. So those are the two that we really talk about in our world, and then you have CoQ10, which helps with muscle cramps, and um, so I think a lot of these supplements have their place in certain roles depending on what the patient's dealing with. Um, but vitamin D for sure we know has played a significant role in bone health, and then obviously in just from the autoimmune perspective. But I will say that I have a lot of cardiology colleagues as well that will say supplements, people taking supplements just based off what they hear on TikTok and social media has actually predisposed them to certain cardiac arrhythmias. So there's definitely risk in taking too many supplements at the same time. So I wouldn't obviously rely on social media and TikTok for, endorsing what vitamins you should and shouldn't be taking. But from an autoimmune perspective, I can speak about that trial, which did show vitamin D to be helpful.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Monica. I guess one question which is kind of obvious, and I'm sure you get all the time, is that how do you manage the work in medicine and treating patients full time with your interest in fashion? And I know you're pretty serious about that. You have lots going on both fronts. How do you manage between the two?
So I always like say it's a balance, but I was listening to a podcast and someone was like, if you really love two things, you shouldn't have to balance it. It shouldn't be a juggling act. He says you should find a way to almost have it be hybrid and synergistic. And I thought that was really profound because it shouldn't be where you have to pick one or choose one. Granted, there's often times in our life where we'll have to sacrifice something at the end of the day based on the circumstances of what's going on. But I do my best to allow myself to have this synergistic effect where I know that my work is fulfilling and so are my hobbies outside of work that are fulfilling. So ultimately, my true happiness comes from my passion and my purpose. And I feel like my purpose is in a few different places. And so I think for me, that's the driving force of being able to uh, take the time to do it. And granted, when work is going on, that work is designated for Monday through Thursday between X, Y, and Z hours. But then you take the time to make for other things that are driving force of your passion. Because I feel like once we compromise one for the other, we get lost in the motions of that world, and we get
Hmm.
almost consumed by that full time. And I've been in that place, so I can speak from that. And I'm still learning how to do all of this. And this is just I'm learning as I go. I think that no one has it truly figured out, and I truly believe that because we're improvising as we go along, and I totally believe that. Um,
Hmm.
but one thing for me is my health and wellness takes precedence because I feel like once I am at my best and I'm feeling my best and I'm healthy mentally, physically, that I can also be my best for my patients and I can be the best in other work environments. So I think knowing
Hmm.
that if you're not feeling 100%, if you're not at your best, then no one's going to get your best. And I think for
Right, of
that
course.
purpose, if we're dealing with other lives and the health of other people, that definitely is important. And then that mental health also plays a component because you're spending so much time doing one thing and then taking the time to do another thing. You have to make sure that you're mentally sound and you feel like you're capable of doing all of this.
Absolutely, absolutely. And something you mentioned, I want to go off of that is, you want to be able to almost hybrid the two interests that you're interested in. So, would love to hear your thoughts on what are some of your experience in medicine that have helped you in the fashion arena as well as the other way around, if there's any.
So in medicine, yeah. So in medicine, you mean like my driving force for my passion for medicine?
Yeah, no, basically
Well,
some
I
of your
think what he's
experiences.
Yeah, I was just gonna build on what you said there. I think what he's
Go
saying
for it.
is that do you have specific situations while practicing medicine that really helped you out when it came to the fashion world? And then was there
Okay.
anything you did in the fashion world that once you thought about, you implemented and added it to your repertoire in the medicine world as well?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I've actually never been asked that before. So now I have a lot of experiences with different personalities in medicine, And I actually, some of my patients have helped me with this because I've met a lot of patients that have actually found me on social media or read about my biography on, our practice's website. And so they got to know a little bit about me in that way. And I think for them, seeing that their doctor is is I feel like doctors get the stigma of being very uptight and they have to be very professional and they have to be like a certain way and they have to act a certain way and be a certain way and carry themselves a certain way. I absolutely believe that. But I think that the waters have shifted a little bit in this generation and we're breaking those walls down because our patients, my patients especially, I can speak for myself, are reminding me that they are also, they're also kind of proud that they have a doctor that's capable of being someone beyond a doctor in a practice room. And the parts that help me are every day I'm reminded of my purpose in the office and my passion. And I think for me, I gain so much fulfillment being in the office that I'm also craving for more in a different environment. And so there are certain instances like that where I speak to my patients and I'm there in and out of the office every day where I'm almost like, okay, this is so fulfilling, but I also have I can also do more. So it's a little bit of my patient interaction where they're reminding me, oh wow, like this is really amazing to see that you can do all these things. And it kind of pushes you to keep going. Like, okay, like, that's really great. Like your patients are really happy with their care. So you're obviously delivering in the exam room, you're delivering the proper care that you can to your patients, but also they're also motivated to continue coming back to you because they see this other part of you, this not other life, but this other hobby of yours that has impacted you as a doctor and made you a better doctor. So I don't know if that answers it correctly. I don't have a specific, I think, but I think just the everyday interactions and the conversations with my patients are motivating enough that they see something that's special there. And sometimes, honestly, it's really nice to get that. We don't live for external validation, but I would be lying to say it doesn't feel good when your patient compliments the fact that they're really happy with who you are as a doctor and what you bring to the table as a person.
No, that actually, I think it does answer the question. And I actually want to build upon that point that you brought up earlier about basically hybriding those two roles to make it synergistic. So it's actually a interview that I remember listening to from Jeff Bezos. This was back when he was running Amazon, not necessarily, after he retired from that. But what he always advocated for was instead of thinking about work-life balance, think about work-life integration. And so to think about that in a personal sense, like let's say you're a parent or something, right? You have children. People at work are going to know about your children, and your children are going to know about what you do at work. At least high level. Obviously, you don't go into all the nitty details or all the confidential stuff, but basically you're able to merge the two worlds together by talking about work at home and talking about home at work. So, and I think that goes in line with what you're talking about hybriding those two areas. Of course, you're talking about two different disciplines, not personal life and professional life, but the same concept applies.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is also another way that you build trust. And I told you about garnering that trust, that patient doctor relationship, because I wanted that. I craved that. I wanted to be the doctor where they came to me about all the great things in their life, but also the ways I've helped them and the ways I can still help them or the things we need to work on together to get them in better shape. So that all comes with the territory, and that's the drive. That's by far, if you say what's your favorite part about your day in day out, is talking to my patients and being able to talk about all those things like, hey, how was your vacation? Hey, how'd you do this? Oh, I knew you were going to do that, that photo shoot. How did it go? What did the pictures look like? So I think that's really uplifting for someone that, especially in medicine, when you're like, should this be exposed? Like, should this part of my life, will I be judged for this? Well, is this considered professional? But I think as of recent, especially Gen Z, and even now moving forward, a lot of people are opening and aware of the fact that you're still a very capable doctor when you are in front of a camera and you're modeling and you're taking photos. Your knowledge is still there. You're still the same person. And I think that's really the key is nothing changes other than maybe I'm not in scrubs and yeah, there's more makeup and there's hair and there's a bunch of lights and everything like that. But I'm still the same person. My knowledge base hasn't changed. My respect for patients hasn't changed. My respect for myself hasn't changed. And I think that's really the key is I'm still the same person.
Got it. Wow.
All right. Unless there's any more questions, I think we're good to move on to the next segment of the podcast, which is the rapid fire round.
Oh, okay. There is one. I didn't know this.
All right. All easy questions. You don't have to worry about that. But I'll
Okay.
start with an easy one. Tea or coffee?
Coffee
All right. All
every
right.
any
day.
Mountains
any
or
specific flavor, like black or like cream two
Um, I,
sugars or
I'm bougie, so it's like black oat milk with a little bit of vanilla.
got it.
all right. Mountains or beaches?
Ooh,
I guess we know
beaches.
this one.
Yeah.
You
She
live in
lives in
Tampa, so
Florida,
I
so
would
I
have
don't think that
guessed.
was a
Yeah, I
surprising
know.
answer.
Yep. Yep. All right. Morning person or night owl?
Morning.
All right. All right. What's your favorite comfort food?
Um, probably. Oh, probably. I have a few, but probably like Thai food.
Okay.
I love Thai
Yeah.
food. Yeah.
I'm gonna take a wild guess and say that you love spicy food then.
Yes. Yeah.
All right.
Absolutely.
So when we say
No,
spicy food, are we talking like Thai spicy or like just
oh yeah.
spicy?
If I'm not crying, it's not a real meal. Like if you're
Oh,
noticing
really?
and I'm not like sniffing all the time, like it's not a real meal.
It's perfect because like isn't I'm pretty sure that spicy food is also anti-inflammatory if I'm not mistaken, right?
In some ways. In some ways. You're sweating some toxins out for sure.
Yeah, exactly. We'll call
Yeah.
it diet career integration. I don't know. I'm just
Yes.
making something up.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. What's your biggest pet peeve?
Ooh. Um. Ugh. Gosh, I can't say like being late because sometimes I'm late, so that's not, you know, biggest pet peeve. Oh, people that are just not clean. Like I'm a clean freak. Everything's tidy. I'll vacuum 1,000 times a day. I don't know if it's a little OCD-ish, but I love a clean house. All the hangers are in the same direction, color coded. Maybe a too much Marie Kondo, but very much a clean person. So anyone that's like unkempt, I think is, you know,
Okay. No, that's a good one. Yeah, yeah. I'm the same way, by the way. Maybe not to that color coding level, but definitely clean and
I
hangers
think
going
like
in the same direction.
I think I took it one step further.
It's all good. It's all good. What's your secret superpower?
Ooh, my secret superpower. I think they call me no chill Mons. I don't know if that's a secret superpower or what, but like if I have 100 things to do that day, I will finish them all. If I have to rearrange,
Wow.
Wow.
no, I don't know. There's something about checking stuff off on the to-do list. So if nothing's checked off, I won't like it needs to all be done before I move on with my day or go to sleep. So I don't know if it's a superpower or not, but I definitely am one for.
Perfectionism? Is it? I'm getting a
Um,
sense there. It seems like you're a perfectionist. That's what I'm getting.
I've leaned away from perfectionist. I just want to be able to complete the task at hand at a decent enough level where I think it's appropriate. So I think I've strayed. If I think I was a perfectionist, nothing would be done. So I've definitely strayed away from that mentality, but I'm definitely like mind over matter. So I will get it done. If it's on the list, consider it done.
Okay, got it. You said you strayed
Wow.
away from it, which makes me think that growing up you were a perfectionist, but you've evolved because you know it's unrealistic.
Absolutely. I
Got
was
it.
that person that's like, it's an A minus, it's not good enough. If it's an A, it's not good enough. Like I almost was like my own Indian mom. I was like, why is it not an A plus? I was that person. But no, my mom wasn't. I was just that person for me. I put the
Wow.
extra pressure on myself to like perform and like So I had to be valedictorian. I had to do all this stuff. So I like had, so I made myself be that way.
Got it.
Gotcha.
Okay.
I have this
Now,
competitive edge to
I,
me.
I, I could tell. Actually, I was able to get that sense. I mean, I wasn't spot on because you're right. You probably moved away from that. Like most people
Yeah,
do. Like people that are really perfectionist younger, as they get older, they realize it's unsustainable, so they typically pivot away.
yeah,
But I got that sense based off of some of your answers, so I thought I'd
yeah.
ask.
I'm competitive, and I want to do a good job. I won't do anything if it's not, if it's not appropriate to stick my name on it and say I did that. But I definitely steered away because it's not healthy.
Makes sense.
Yeah,
All right. What's a superpower you wish you had? And this one can be unrealistic.
unrealistic. Um, it's not a good one. I wish I could predict the future. That's not one. That's not a good
No, it's pretty
one.
good.
I'm human, and I always wonder, like, oh, what's next, and will this work out? But a lot of my growth has also come from accepting what it is right now, and being okay with
Hmm.
it, and then knowing I'm doing my best at this moment and letting things play out. So it's a double-edged sword because, like, yeah, that would be great, but I also, like you said, it's not realistic at all, and so if
Yeah,
we're in terms of like hypotheticals and totally unrealistic, maybe that, because and it comes down to a lot of other things like how much time do I have, to spend with these certain people in my life, and a lot of life is so unpredictable, and but I think that's
right.
also that unpredictability of life is also what makes me the way I am today. Spending the time with certain people and quality time and being present and all those things. So yeah,
Yeah.
consider it that, and I also use that as my driving force for being this way that I am right now.
Absolutely. And actually, here's a thought in that. I was actually there is this author called Yuval Noah Harari. His book *Sapiens*. I think it's probably one of the best published book. He mentioned one thing about future prediction that really stuck with me, and he says that if somebody is able to predict the future accurately, then the future will or the prediction will cease to exist actually in the first place. So, for example, if you know a certain patient is going to work out well in the end, you probably wouldn't put the effort that you would have if you didn't know
Yeah,
the fact that patient's gonna be well. So it's an interesting quandary, that the beauty
exactly
of
what I
life is in its
yeah,
unpredictability.
that's exactly what I was
So
thinking. It's a double-edged sword.
exactly, yeah, yeah. It's interesting, and yeah, the beauty of life, as I was saying, is that it's actually in its unpredictability, and just
Yes.
what's to come. It's
Yeah,
what keeps it
I
going.
couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more.
All right, so I guess we are at the end of our rapid fire, but one question. What's been your biggest accomplishment in the last 1 or 2 years?
Ooh, I have a few. I think for me personally, this is I feel like I still have so much to learn and to grow,
Of
but I
course.
think mentally my mental health and my growth as a person internally has substantially 180'd in the last 1 to 2 years based on like life circumstances and how I've chosen to shift my mindset, which has dramatically changed my life for the better in so many ways. And I think that's what's paralleled my success in my growth in my career, in medicine and fashion and all of that is. So I think it's like almost a domino effect. So I have success in a few different departments of my life, but I think that all stemmed
Hmm.
from me taking the time to work on myself and my mental health, my physical health, and work on that mindset shift so that I could parallel that success in other places.
Absolutely. And would you say that pandemic have anything to do with that? Basically, the pandemic allow you the time to reflect and process things that you're not really processing before?
Um, pandemic, pandemic definitely was an eye opener. I don't think it was as much
Hmm.
as a catalyst for me. It was definitely an
Got
eye
it.
opener in the fragility of life and what can happen in a blink of an eye that can impact our entire world. So in that sense, from a health standpoint, absolutely. But I think it was my own personal experiences and some of the things I went through on my own and that I struggled with on my own irrespective of the pandemic. Some of it through the pandemic, of course, but I don't think it was the pandemic itself.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah,
No, that's totally fair.
yeah.
All right. So I guess before we wrap, the last question we like to ask all our guests. Do you have any recommendations for our listeners? And a recommendation could be any piece of media, a book, a movie, podcast, anything, or it could be general advice as well.
Yeah, I recently, not recently, in the last few months, I should say, maybe that's recently. I've gotten really into listening to the Mel Robbins podcast on my way to work every day. She has honestly like become my like car best friend. She keeps it very real, and I think that's what I really gravitated towards in the podcast. Is she keeps it so basic, layman's terms, how we can all improve ourselves. She takes questions from listeners actively in her podcast and answers those questions in her podcast. She is a action forward podcast. So I like that.
Hmm.
It's not just sitting here giving you advice, telling you things that are helpful. It's, hey, here are action items. Here are the things you should do. Here's step 1. Here's step 2. Here's step 3. And that I think is the difference in her podcast is it's all action forward. So she really prides herself on that, and I've mentioned her in my social media a few times, but she really has shifted a lot of perspective for me in a positive light. And that's in terms of social media, in terms of self confidence, in terms of happiness, in terms of, personal growth. And so definitely her podcast for sure. And I think piece like something I like to live by is stop chasing, start attracting. The universe aligns when you're your authentic self, and I think I mean that in the best way possible because I feel like once we are our true selves and we are our authentic personality and we share with the world what is important to us, why we are the way we are, people will gravitate towards that nature, towards that mindset, towards that personality. And I feel like we all have a story, and like what you guys, the reason you guys did this podcast is to get to know people and their journeys. And I feel like we all have a story to tell that can hopefully help someone out there and can change us for the better. And that's what I really hope. That's what my social media is about. That's what I kind of preach when I meet people. That's the energy I give out. So that's really, really important to me. So I truly believe that. Stop chasing, start attracting.
Love it.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. This was very educational and very inspirational at the same time. We hope you had a great experience sharing your story with us here. And
Yeah.
what we did want to do is give you a chance to plug any social media or any other handles that you wanted to share.
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram at Dr. Monica, and same username on TikTok and same username on Twitter. And I hope that this has helped someone out there. I love to engage with my followers and people in the social media community. So feel free to reach out, ask questions. I'd love to connect with so many of you guys. So
For sure.
All right. Fantastic. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining. Have a great rest of your day.
thank you guys.
Thanks, everybody.